headed down to Acapulco. I know I'm headed down to Acapulco with the long white sands where I might have a chance. Yeah, we're gonna head down to Acapulco.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Chris Horlacher. Chris, thanks for being here.
All right, well, thank you for coming here today. I hope you're all enjoying Anarchapulco. This is my first time here, and I just love what I'm seeing. There's so many interesting people here who have a lot of motivation to get things done in the world. And this is what I wanted to talk to you about today. My talk is called The Revolutionary Entrepreneur: 3 Industries to Liberate Humanity in Our Time. And a lot of what we hear can sometimes cross into the realm of despair and running away from the governments and defending what we have. I'm here to talk to you today about how we can go on the offensive. And it's not, grab your guns and let's go blow up government buildings. Our fight is going to be in the world of economics. And I think we're going to be a lot more successful in that. So I'd like to introduce a concept called the commanding heights. And this was something that, well, let me back it up a little bit more. So 3 years into the new Bolshevik government in Russia, the country was already falling apart. Millions of people were starving, and something had to be done. And naturally, of course, the solution to the problems of a totalitarian government are to remove the totalitarian controls. And of course, with millions of starving people, Lenin, decided that he had to relinquish most of the control, or a good deal of it, over the agricultural industry and return some semblance of property rights and the ability to trade back to farmers to incentivize them to produce more food. Stalin was not a fan, Trotsky wasn't a fan, but nevertheless, it had to be done. And so in 1921, they enacted the new economic policy, and Lenin pitched this to everybody saying, yeah, sure, we're going to give the farms back to, the people, but we're going to keep the commanding heights of the economy under our control. And the reason why he called it the commanding heights is that you control key economic sectors. You can influence the entire civilization that you're governing because there's only a few industries that all other industries are dependent upon. And so we're going to get into looking at some of these. Now, when the Russians did it, they basically just handed back the agricultural industry, kept manufacturing, kept energy, kept a whole bunch of other things. But even then, that was still too much government, and eventually it all fell apart. People didn't like what they were seeing and experiencing. Western governments, on the other hand, like the United States, have perfected this process. And now, with relatively few industries under their control, they are able to exert significant influence over the entire society. So I've distilled these things down to 3 things: mind, energy, and money. Mind is important because without our minds, we can't do anything. We're just blobs of flesh, eating and pooping and not getting nothing done. So we need our minds, and we need our minds to be working at their peak capacity in order to realize the type of society and civilization that we want to be in. Energy is the means of which to make that happen. And without energy, we cannot produce buildings, we can't make cities, we can't create metal, jet engines, you name it. Everything requires energy, and that's why they call it the master resource. And now that we have our minds and our energy to produce wealth, we need money in order to track who owns it and how to trade it and invest for the future. So these 3 things are absolutely critical for every civilization if they're going to succeed. And by controlling these 3 things, present-day governments have been able to cement their position in society. But technology is power. And as technology advances, we've seen huge advancements in individual liberty. The printing press brought reading to the masses, and this has just accelerated with the internet. Now we're more aware and more informed than ever before. So I have 2 quotes here by 2 very important individuals about how technology the creative destruction of the marketplace is constantly reinventing our civilization and pushing things forward. And we can harness this ability of innovation and technology to take back the commanding heights of the economy from the government. So we're going to start with our minds, because naturally that's where everything started. You've heard it before, public school is not what you thought it was, and it's absolutely true. This is a system that was designed by the bureaucrats or the managerial class of society with the intention of producing human beings in the same way that cars roll off of a factory floor. The public school system was built to create obedient, hardworking citizens who know just enough to work the machines, but are dumb enough not to question the ruling class and what their true intentions are for society. So going a little bit deeper into this and how it all worked, probably one of the best authors out there on this topic is John Taylor Gatto. If you've ever read any of his books, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about here. But let's see, I don't have my notes. Here we go. Why isn't this working? So, sorry, I just wanted to show you just a little bit more detail on how this works. But so Alexander Inglis was he's a Harvard professor, and he's known as one of the founding fathers of the educational system that we have here today. And in his book, Principles of a Secondary Education, he introduced the 6 principles of public education. And this is what it is there to do. And the first function is the adjustive function. Public schools are meant to imprint a fixed habit or a reaction to authority. So people will always bow down and kowtow to the people who are in authority. And we heard a lot about that word from Larkin Rose earlier today. This is where the lie comes from. The next step is the integrative function. You may know this by another name called socialization. This is where the kids are taught to blend in, fly under the radar, don't rock the boat, and then, if you do those 3 things, you'll live a happy and productive life. So don't stick your head up, because otherwise you're going to get it chopped off. The diagnostic function is something from schools that is meant to analyze the individuals that are going through the system and figure out what life path we're going to put on everybody. And we're going to decide ahead of time who this person is going to grow up to be and what they're going to do. And in the Soviet Union, we saw this carried to ridiculous extremes, where people literally had their careers, and even in some cases, their spouses, handpicked for them by the bureaucracy. The selective function and differentiating function play off of the diagnostic function. Now that we know what talents this person has, we're going to then herd them in certain ways that we feel they should be heading in towards. And then finally, the propedeutic function is, we're not immortal. Eventually, the people who are running this system are going to need to be replaced. So here we have a self-perpetuating system designed to produce obedient, unquestioning, loyal citizens. So we need to get rid of it. And so how are we going to disrupt this? Well, fortunately, I already mentioned the solution here before. We have the internet. And the internet is the world's most powerful means of communication that has ever been invented. It's now practically free to distribute any sort of information, multimedia content, anywhere on Earth, and make it interactive, which can be very different from an in-classroom setting where somebody is writing on a chalkboard, and if you don't ask too many questions, otherwise you might frustrate the teacher. So I mentioned this at the TDB conference, but if we really, really want to create a better world and a world that's going to last, we need to invest in the minds of our children. And that's done through homeschooling or other online or correspondence courses. And this is already exploding, but we need more. We need more of this from talented, smart individuals, other professionals in the community, people who understand history or economics or law or physics or biology or you name it. If you have a skill or a profession and are willing and able to communicate this to the next generation, I implore you to get out there and try your hand at this new marketplace, because there's a lot of ways for you to get out there and do that. Massive online courses, they're called MOOCs, are exploding across the internet. MIT has released piles and piles and piles of courses, and so online learning is now becoming a huge, huge industry, and this is where we can start to reshape our world. So the next part of this equation is energy production. And this is an industry that has been typically monopolized by the state for good reason. And this is the industry that we next wanted to focus our efforts. So I know there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of people out there who like solar, they like wind. I came from a physics background before I went into finance. I studied engineering physics at McMaster University. So I'm a nuclear guy. I love nuclear reactors. I think they're just the coolest things ever. And I was so surprised to learn that 50 years ago, a nuclear reactor was designed and built and actually worked that is orders of magnitude better, safer, cleaner than any nuclear technology that we see around today. And there was a debate in the 1970s, early 1970s, actually the same year that Nixon killed the gold standard, 2 months before, he killed that reactor experiment that I was just telling you about. There were 2 reactor technologies that were being worked on, and these were called breeder reactors. And these were reactors that could use nuclear fuel at rates that were hundreds of times more efficient than present-day nuclear reactors. And it didn't come down to which one was safer or better or produced more power. It came down to which laboratory was working on the reactor in Nixon's district. Because he wanted the work and the money to go to his district because he wanted to win re-elections like any other politician. And so we have our 2 quotes here. We have a guy named Alvin Weinberg. He was head of Oak Ridge National Labs developing the reactor that I'm talking about. And Richard Nixon is talking about the other breeder reactor that did not work. And we're going to see why. So quick rundown of how nuclear reactor technology works. There's 2 elements that we can create fissile material from, that being uranium and thorium. Uranium comes in 2 isotopes naturally. We have U-238, which is the vast majority of it, and we also have U-235, which is the one that we're really interested in because that's the one we can fission. Problem is it's in very low concentrations in uranium ore. So we have to build these huge facilities to do something called isotopic separation to bring the concentration of U-235 up to a point where we can then put it in a light water reactor and fission it to get our energy. Very inefficient, and I think you can all see why. U-238, there was lots of it around, but that in itself doesn't fission. However, if you do hit it with a neutron, it will decay, and it will eventually turn into plutonium-239, which will fission. And it fissions quite well. It's so well, this is what all of our nuclear arsenal is made out of. They're all plutonium bombs. The fast breeder reactor was the technology that Nixon threw the weight of the US government behind. And to date, there are no plutonium fast breeder reactors in operation throughout the world. And the reason why is they are very hard to keep a handle on. You can't control the rate that you're breeding plutonium, and you can go into thermal overrun, otherwise known as a meltdown, very easily. So the last alternative is this other little known nuclear fuel called thorium. Thorium is an extremely abundant fuel, 4 times more available than uranium, and we can use every single ounce of it. And fortunately, we're already producing mountains of the stuff. It's a huge byproduct of the rare earth mining industry. So one man's garbage is our gold. And we can put this into a reactor called a liquid fluoride thorium reactor, which doesn't use solid fuel pellets anymore. And this was the key innovation of what this reactor design has. It actually dissolves the thorium into a molten salt and pumps it into the core of the reactor, which generates our heat and powers our turbines. And there are significant advantages of using a liquid fuel over a solid fuel. Key among these things is a safety feature, which they just call a freeze plug. Now, molten salt already is quite hot, so if you cool down a drain hole at the bottom of the reactor, it will freeze. And if the reactor goes into thermal overrun, or you're not paying too close attention, it will just melt through that plug and your fuel drains out of the core. Reaction done. So then they tested this. They would literally cut off power to the reactor and leave and come back the next day, and of course it had burned through the plug hole and everything had drained out and everything worked fine. Thorium reactors also run at very high operating temperatures, which is great for turbine efficiencies. We don't need to use steam turbines anymore, which are these big, huge monstrosities. We can use little tiny gas turbines running on Brayton cycle. So the efficiencies are huge. You can get about 60% thermal conversion on a Brayton cycle turbine. In a combined cycle, you can bring that up to 90%. And this is what one of these reactors looks like. So incredibly compact reactor design. These things will fit in the footprint of a medium-sized house and produce gigawatts of power. So if you can imagine a homeowners association putting money into its local reactor, and something like that could power thousands or even millions of homes. So we are on the cusp of building this technology. India and China have started to look at this technology, but they're not exactly bastions of freedom. This is something that we need to take upon ourselves, I think, and push forward to try and bring these things into reality. Because what does it mean when our capacity to produce energy goes up hundreds of times beyond what it is today? What does a society look like when it has more energy than it can imagine what to do with? You'd be buying your electricity by the megawatt, not the kilowatt. And there's a lot of good things that come out of these reactors. We have an abundance of energy. Water desalination becomes a very commercially viable enterprise. It also produces a number of medical isotopes, which are very expensive and very hard to get. And we need these things in order to treat some very serious diseases. So lifter technology, I think, is something that we really need to get behind as a community. I realize energy is not it's not a game for everybody, but I know that were certainly a few people in the audience here who have the means and hopefully now the motivation to get behind this and push this technology forward. And finally, we get to the money side of the commanding heights and financial services. And so here again, I have some very important quotes from some very important people talking about what they thought about the financial system. And we cannot, you absolutely cannot underestimate the importance of the financial system. The money power is beyond anything that we have, that most people can comprehend. You think a nuclear bomb is bad, but a nuclear bomb will wipe out buildings and maybe a city. The financial power can destroy an entire civilization completely. So we need to get this out of the hands of the people who are only interested in perpetuating their own power. So you saw Carol Quigley's quote earlier. That's from Tragedy and Hope, great book. If you haven't read it, it's a long read, but it's certainly a good history book. But this is what the modern banking system looks like. We have our commercial banks on the bottom. We have the central banks in the middle and the Bank of International Settlements at the tip of the pyramid. And so, as he said, the central banks operate like feudal lords over an empire of debt-creating machinery. And so, again, let's not try and fix this. Let's Let's do what Buckminster Fuller said. Let's invent a new model that makes this model obsolete. Fortunately, a lot of the hard work has already been done. We now have a peer-to-peer system of transferring value anywhere in the world instantaneously, which is completely immune from capital controls. This is the world's perfect money. And the people in power, if you look at the Rand Corporation quote, they know this. And they know that this is a problem and it is going to chip away at their ability to control world economies. And so, if they're afraid of it, I want more of it. I want lots of it. I want everybody out here to start a Bitcoin or a cryptocurrency project or get involved in one of these things. It's one of the easiest ways that you can push back against the state and take back your own power. So, to close off, we are the revolution. We are here talking about ideas, exchanging contacts, making business connections. This is the revolution right here. And this is how it's going to happen. Passionate individuals who are getting informed, getting involved, and not afraid to take chances. And the best part about this is that we are literally awash in opportunities to produce businesses and new technologies and services and goods that will completely undermine the social order that we're all complaining about, and the reason why we call this Anarchapulco and not Statopia. So thank you very much.
On a beach bar underneath the Mexican sky, drink some margaritas by a string of blue lights.
How was the conference this year?
Absolutely fantastic.
It's an amazing experience.
The conference is great. It's the best thing I've ever been to, probably in my life, honestly.
It's a blast. It's really fun. There's so many things to do.
Just the spirit, just the energy, amazing moments, amazing people.
It's really, really fun.
It's better than you could expect.
I think it's the best conference I've ever been to.
Are you coming back next year?
I wish we were already at next year so I could come back. It was so much fun.
I feel like I'm part of a big family here.
I've made so many amazing friends, instant amazing friends.
It's incredible to be around people who are so evolved.
The best part is always the people.
It's almost overwhelming. Just so many amazing people in one place.
There's always the trailblazers, and a lot of them are here.
This is now a pillar of the global community of freedom activists.
I mean, I'm filled. I feel like a champagne glass. Bubbly, renewed, festive.
A lot of people always complain, where are the women? Yeah, in Anarchapulco, that's where they're at.
Everybody wants to be friends. Everybody just wants to learn more about each other and really get to know each other because we already have so much in common, so why not actually be friends?
If you want to be a part of it, come and experience it because you're not going to get this experience anywhere else.
You will grow as a person.
What would you say to people that are on the fence about coming here next year?
I would say that you absolutely have to come.
You only live life once, and you better come because you'll live to regret it if you don't.
Get rid of that limiting belief. Be free.
You won't regret it. You'll have like a really amazing memory, and it will be awesome.
A lot of people thought about it and were on the fence. And then when they see some of the footage later and they hear some of the stories, they start thinking, my God, why didn't I go to that? Why the hell not? It's amazing. It's beautiful here. Come on down.
If you've been here once, you would never not come back. So I think if someone's never been and they're thinking of coming, to them I'd say, get your ass over here or you're going to be sorry. But if you've been here already, I'll see you here next year.